You know that feeling you're just scrolling, endless feeds, news popping up like every second, and you just feel overwhelmed, like you're drowning in information, but maybe not really getting much deep insight.
Yeah, totally. That constant barrage.
Exactly. The sense that modern life is just relentless. Well, that feeling, trying to find real insight in all that noise, that's kind of what we're getting into today. A look at a pretty fundamental critique of modernity.
Right. Okay, so where should we start? A really core point for Nietzsche. It has to do with the whole idea of objectivity, of truth with a capital T.
Ah, okay. So not just facts and figures.
Not at all. He didn't see philosophy as this like neutral quest for universal facts. He actually saw it as deeply personal, almost like a confession of faith, he said, or even an involuntary and unself-conscious memoir.
Wow, okay, a memoir. So he's saying it's not just about pure logic, that the philosopher's own beliefs, their maybe hidden motives, their moral or immoral intentions, that's the real engine driving their big ideas.
That's precisely it. It's a strong claim.
Yeah.
He basically argued, look, if you want to understand some grand philosophical system, don't just look at the logic. First ask, what values is this person really pushing?
What are they trying to get us to believe is right or wrong?
Exactly. What are they getting at? And from that viewpoint, he said, well, he wasn't trying to find some universally accepted truth. He saw that whole idea as a metaphysical illusion, something he thought was basically false.
So he wasn't trying to give us the answers, the final word.
Not in that sense, no. He was offering perspectives, narratives almost.
Yeah.
Things he felt would click with a certain type of person, those who were, the right kind of person, in his words, to really get his way of seeing things.
Okay, and that leads to his idea about perspectivism, is that right?
You got it. Perspectivism. The idea that any truth we grasp is inherently a partial truth. It's shaped by our viewpoint, our subjective lens.
Like looking at a statue from different sides, you see different things, all true from that angle, but none are the whole picture.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Each perspective is valid from its position, but it's not the complete story.
Man, that really makes you pause when you think about the fire hose of information today. How much of what gets presented as just the facts might actually be tied to a specific angle, maybe even an agenda we don't see?
It's a powerful question to ask, isn't it? For you listening, maybe Nietzsche's point is about actively looking for those different angles, not to find the one truth, but to build a richer, maybe more honest picture, even if it's still incomplete. Recognizing the lens.
Recognizing the lens. I like that. Okay, so he questions truth itself. Where does he go from there with his critique of modern ideas?
Well, he takes that questioning lens and turns it onto the big values that were gaining steam in his day and are still huge for us.
Right.
Things like, democracy, equality, the idea of progress, widespread morality.
The stuff we often see as just good, obvious positives.
Right, but Nietzsche looked at them very critically. Sometimes he even saw them as potential signs of decay. Degeneration.
Whoa, okay, decay. That sounds harsh. Why would he think that?
Well, he tried to trace where our common values actually came from. And he argued their origins weren't always noble. He pointed to things like, appalling character traits, weakness, fear, wishful thinking, even like lying to ourselves.
So he's digging underneath the surface of why we value what we value?
Exactly. He wasn't necessarily saying kindness or equality are bad in themselves, but he was obsessed with understanding why they became dominant values.
Okay, and this is where the famous master morality and slave morality come in. Can you break that down simply?
Sure. Think of it as two basic ways of looking at good and bad. Master morality, which Nietzsche linked to, say, aristocratic or powerful groups, values things that make individuals stand out, elevate them.
Like strength, power, nobility.
Precisely. Good is tied to being strong, self-affirming. Excellence is key.
Celebrating the exceptional. Got it.
Then there's slave morality. He saw this emerging from groups who were, oppressed or felt weaker. Their values are different. They tend to prioritize things that ease suffering, build community.
Like kindness, humility, pity, compassion.
Exactly. And in this system, good often gets defined by contrasting it with the evil of the powerful, the masters. What they are is bad.
Okay, I see the split. And Nietzsche felt modern society was increasingly dominated by this slave morality.
He did. He worried about it. He saw this emphasis on, say, compassion for all, leveling the playing field. He worried it could end up stifling true individual greatness, hindering the drive for excellence.
So if we talk today about, say, addressing inequality or focusing on victim narratives, would Nietzsche just dismiss that as slave morality? Or is it more complex?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? He certainly saw the rise of what he termed slave morality as potentially problematic for developing strength and higher culture. He thought the focus on alleviating suffering could paradoxically weaken us.
Interesting. A trade-off, maybe.
Perhaps how he saw it. Now, whether he'd view all modern efforts at social justice purely through that lens is hard to say definitively. But his framework pushes us to think about those potential tensions. And it ties into his skepticism about why philosophers philosophize in the first place.
Right. You mentioned he doubted it was just about the drive for knowledge.
Yeah, he suspected that underneath the logical arguments, there were usually deeper moral intentions pulling the strings.
So even seeking truth wasn't pure for him. It sounds like he was pretty worried about where things were going, which connects to that herd instinct idea. Yeah.
Very much so. He used terms like herd instinct a lot when talking about people embracing these modern ideas. He saw this growing uniformity, a pressure to conform.
Less independent thinking.
Exactly. And he worried about it. He even warned the future might belong to the hopelessly mediocre, that the main rule would become, unspokenly, be like everyone else, be mediocre.
Oof. That's unsettling, especially when you think about, social media today, the pressure to fit in, maybe even cancel culture.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, are we valuing fitting in over standing out?
It definitely prompts that question for you, the listener. And his critique didn't stop there. He also looked at how the very idea of the soul was changing in philosophy.
The soul? How so?
He argued that philosophers, especially since Descartes, have been chipping away at the traditional concept of the soul, often by attacking the grammar we use to talk about a stable self, the subject doing the verb, the I.
Attacking grammar to kill the soul? That sounds very Nietzschean. What was the point?
He saw it as undermining a core idea in Christianity, the enduring, unified self. He felt that a lot of modern philosophy, with its focus on epistemological skepticism, basically questioning what we can truly know, was often, subtly or not so subtly, anti-Christian.
Even if it wasn't explicitly anti-religious in general.
Right. He made that distinction. And he linked this philosophical trend to the big social changes he saw in Europe.
Like what?
The mixing of classes, of races. He felt this created a kind of inherent skepticism in modern Europe, a loss of a stable center of certainty.
Which led to anxiety about identity meaning.
That's how he saw it.
Yep.
An unease that you could argue still feels very familiar today in our own fast-changing, diverse world. It's like the ground felt less solid underfoot.
Okay, now we have to talk about one of his most challenging ideas, the one about cruelty and culture. This one can be really tough.
It really can. He makes this very provocative claim that pretty much everything we call higher culture, art, tragedy, even some forms of knowledge, is built on the spiritualization and deepening of cruelty.
Okay, wait. He's not saying we should be cruel, right? Please tell me that's not it.
No, absolutely not. It's crucial to understand that. He wasn't advocating cruelty. He saw himself as making an observation, maybe a disturbing one, about how culture develops. He argued that the wild animal inside us, our primal instincts, haven't vanished. They've just been transformed, refined, made divine, as he put it.
Transformed how? Can you give an example, maybe something less literal?
Think about tragedy, a powerful play or a film, the intense emotions, the pity, the fear, even that weird kind of pleasure we get from the tension. Nietzsche suggested that the raw energy behind those feelings has roots in this primal capacity for and fascination with suffering and power, which includes cruelty. It's been sublimated, channeled into something complex and artistic.
So it's like the raw power is still there, but it's expressed differently. Through art, maybe, not direct violence.
That's a good way to put it. It's about the intensity, the exploration of difficult emotions, not about endorsing harmful acts. It's definitely one of his ideas that requires careful thought.
For sure. Okay, shifting gears a bit, but maybe related to standing apart, he also talked a lot about distance, right? Independence.
Yeah. Yes, hugely important for him. He saw independence as a mark of strength. He warned against getting too attached, stuck, he might say, to people, to places, even to your own pet theories or virtues.
Don't get too comfortable, too complacent.
Pretty much. He stressed the importance of the pathos of distance, that feeling of being slightly separate, able to observe from a higher, maybe more objective viewpoint. He thought maintaining that detachment was key for developing deeper understanding, a more sovereign perspective on things, less swayed by the immediate pressures.
That feels surprisingly useful today. In this world where everyone's shouting opinions, maybe deliberately creating some distance, stepping back, it could be really valuable for just thinking clearly.
I think so.
Yeah.
We do need to tackle one of the most contentious areas of his thought, his critique involving the Enlightenment and his views on women.
Right. This is often where people really struggle with Nietzsche, and understandably so.
Absolutely. He was critical of the women's movement of his time, particularly the push for independence and what he saw as attempts to enlighten men about woman and herself. He actually saw this as contributing to increasing ugliness in society.
Okay. So what was his argument there, remembering this is his 19th century perspective?
His argument, in essence, was that women's traditional power and, frankly, allure lay in their difference from men, in their subtlety, their unique instincts. He worried that the specific kind of emancipation being sought was actually a sign that those instincts were weakening.
That women were trying to become like men, which he saw as less powerful, or even a form of stupidity, as he put it.
That was his controversial take, yes. He feared they were giving up their unique strengths by trying to adopt masculine ones.
Okay, it's absolutely critical here to stress. We're explaining Nietzsche's view as part of his overall critique of modernity. This isn't an endorsement, not at all. It's about understanding the historical context and the full scope of his arguments, however problematic they seem now. We have to look at it with our modern critical thinking caps firmly on.
Precisely. It's presented for understanding his analysis within its time. Now, another interesting distinction he made was about genius. He saw two kinds.
Two types of genius.
Yeah. One type that sort of begets, creates the seed, the initial impulse, and another type that gives birth. Takes that seed and develops it, brings it to fruition, shapes it.
Okay, and he applied this to whole cultures too.
He did. He saw some cultures as primarily formative, complete, like the ancient Greeks, maybe the French, that give birth. Others he thought were more about impregnating, sparking new things, like the ancient Jews, the Romans. He even speculated the Germans might fit this begetting category.
Interesting. So one kind plants the idea, the other brings it to harvest, metaphorically speaking.
That's a good way to think about it. It's about whether the genius lies in originating the new or in perfecting and completing the form.
You could almost apply that to individuals today, couldn't you? The radical innovator versus the master craftsperson who refines something to its peak.
Exactly. So wrapping up this deep dive into Beyond Good and Evil, we've covered some pretty big themes in his critique of modernity, haven't we?
We really have. Questioning truth itself, skepticism about modern values like equality and progress, that whole worry about the herd instinct and mediocrity.
Right. Plus his reevaluation of things like the soul, the surprising role he saw for cruelty in culture, and that constant emphasis on independence, on distance.
And of course, those really challenging views on women and emancipation, which show how much he was pushing against the grain of his time and still sparks debate.
Definitely. And look, these are often uncomfortable ideas. They're meant to be. Nietzsche wasn't trying to give easy answers. He wanted to provoke thought, to make us question assumptions we don't even realize we have.
So for you listening, hoping for that quick but deep knowledge, those aha moments, we hope this has sparked some of that. Maybe take a moment to think. How do these 19th century critiques land in your 21st century world?
Yeah, what modern ideas feel like they might need a second look? Where do you maybe see that herd instinct playing out around you?
Great questions. So our final provocative thought for you to chew on is this. Considering Nietzsche's warnings about a possible morality of mediocrity taking over, what counterforces, if any, do you actually see in the world today? What things might be pushing back, championing genuine individual excellence and distinction against that tide?
Definitely something to mull over.